Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to my sewing room. Happy to have you here. So just want to make a few announcements that I do have Amy and Meredith. They are working in the background. So if you have any questions, please do type them in the chat and they will be happy to answer those questions for you. They'll relay it to me and we can answer those live. Also, I am going to ask those two wonderful ladies that if they will be willing to type in the names of the stabilizer that I'm going to be talking about. There's a few of them that the title is kind of tricky, like In Our Form and Stitch in the Ditch. People always get confused on how those are, so I will have them type those words in the chat so that you can see them. So I think without further ado, we can go ahead and get started. I am Wendy. It says it right there under my name, and I'm a PFAFF educator, and I'm so happy to have you in my room today. And we are going to be talking about stabilizers. I know you probably hear so much about stabilizers, but what I'm going to focus on is not so much the instructions that come with the stabilizers, but I'm going to talk about the stabilizers that I use, that I like, and why I use them and where I use them. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start out with the easy ones, and then we'll move forward with the rest of them. Of course, the most easy one is no-show mesh. Everybody loves their no-show mesh. Before it was, they used either just a cutaway or they used just a tearaway, and that's what most people had. And then a no-show mesh hit the market, and it totally changed the way, people use stabilizer. And I know there are some people, so as to almost always are using a no-show mesh opposed to any of the other stabilizers. And that is okay. If it's working for you, I'm not the stabilizer police. You do you. I do use other stabilizers. I do use cutaways. I do use tearaways, and there's different reasons why I use them. But as for the no-show mesh, that one is my go-to stabilizer if I am doing piecing in the hoop. Have you ever done, when I mean piecing in the hoop is you're making a quilt block in the embroidery units, and you're laying your fabric and stitches, you flip it back, you give it a little finger press to hold it in place, and then you do your next piece. I like using the no-show mesh for that because it is a very lightweight stabilizer. It doesn't make a noise like some of your tearaway stabilizers will. So if it lives inside of that quilt, behind that quilt block, I'm okay with that because it doesn't add any extra warmth. It doesn't have a crunchy sound to it. So for me, it's ideal for doing it with that piecing in the hoop. Of course, I also use a fusible no-show mesh if I'm embroidering on a knit of some kind. Most of the time, it's like a polo shirt or something like that. So if you use that fusible no-show mesh, it's going to help control that stretch. And if you reheat it, you can also cut the excess away so that it's not like this big piece of stabilizer behind your nice embroidery. Okay, I'm going to move on from no-show mesh because there are a few others that I want to talk to you about and be able to show you some things. There are your tearaways. We'll talk about those later, but I just want to talk about some of mine go-to ones. And one of them is In Our Form, and you may have heard of this. It is a lightweight, and I will ask Meredith or Amy to type that in. It is called In Our Form. It is a batting alternative. So it is, 100% polyester, so there's warmth to it. Not meant to be used for quilts. I know when you hear batting, a lot of people think instantly quilts. I use it more for its ideal in placemats. I also used it in this book. So if you can see that. So this part right here that you can see, it's puffy. I can't think of a good word for it, embossed, if you will. So how I did that was that is a marine vinyl, and I hooped some basic tearaway stabilizer, layered the In Our Form on top of the stabilizer, and then I laid my marine vinyl on top of that. And because that embroidery design it's a textured fabric embroidery design, all of that texture, and let me pick that up again so you can see it. All of this texture right here kind of looks like really tight stippling. That pushed the in our form down so that it would raise up the pattern just to get an embossed look, a raised look. And it was, this was probably one of the easiest projects I ever did. I think the embroidery took longer to stitch out than it did for me to actually make the book cover itself. But again, that embroidery didn't take very long at all. And that embroidery design is now available on my SewNet embroidery library. So if you like this book, or you can go ahead and download that design and make one for yourself. The marine vinyl I just found at one of my big box stores. Not that expensive, and it really embroidered out nicely. The other thing that you can use in our form for is bags. So this bag has the in our form in it. This is very much quilted. Don't know if I can get close enough. So this bag, opposed to batting, it has in our form in it. It was quilted on my Epic 2, and I used my IDT feature with it. Went like stitched through it like butter, like awesome. And then you can see that this can get folded down, and you can stick it in a suitcase and take it with you so that you have a bag that you can stick all your souvenirs in, and you can now take this on the plane. So it fits in your suitcase perfectly. Doesn't have to be this bag. I think this is the Mary Poppins bag. I'm not sure. And the bottom has Decker Bond on the bottom. So that is another great use for the in our form. And I'm so sorry. I think I said Epic 2, and I meant to say my Icon 2. My apologies. Okay, so the next stabilizer I'd like to talk about is, I didn't take it off the boat. This is one of my favorites. This is called So Soft Batting. And if you can see, this is so thin, but it gives you lots of body. It is a fusible, and it is ideal for if you wanted to make a quilted jacket. It gives you a little bit of warmth. It gives you some body to that jacket, but it doesn't make you feel like you're wearing a jacket that is going to make you feel like the Tin Man. It's really flexible, and it's lightweight. You can also use it as a stabilizer when you're doing some quilting in the hoop. So let's say you're making a quilt square, and you're going to be embroidering out a design that is quite dense. That would be ideal to give it a little bit of body, some soft body, and it'll really support that dense embroidery. And I would still use regular batting when I put that quilt together. I'm just using that So Soft as just a little extra, a little oomph, just to help support that embroidery design, but support it with softness. I do have an example here of a quilted jacket that has that lightweight batting in it, and you can see that it's not bulletproof. It's very flexible. So if you were wearing this out and about, it would be a very comfortable jacket to wear. Perfect for the springtime or the fall. Right now we've got fog going on, and I totally love it. It's gray skies out there. I love it. And there's a light drizzle. Perfect weather for me. And this would be an awesome jacket to wear in this kind of weather. I don't know what the pattern is. I know everybody wants to know, but I don't know. I don't remember. I apologize. Okay. If I'm going too fast, please do let me know. I do kind of talk fast. Let's see. I made notes because, you know, there are so many stabilizers to talk about, and I want to make sure that I get some of the better stabilizers in so that you know about them. So I made myself some notes because I will forget. Clear and melt. How many of you like your clear and melt? Not that I can see you raising your hands, but clear and melt can be a wonderful stabilizer. So when you think clear and melt, yes, that is the stabilizer that you heat up, and it will, I don't want to say it'll dissolve away. It melts away. It creates these little balls that you can just brush away. Most people think of it as a topper, and it's great for a topper. Don't get me wrong. It's perfect for fabrics that you do not want to get wet. Velvets, things with piles. You can even use it on terry cloth towels that you're going to embroider, and this is going to be a gift. You don't want to put it through the washer. You want to try and keep that crispness of a brand new purchased towel. Clear and melt works great for that too. One thing I would suggest to you though, make sure that you read the instructions because the heat setting does truly make a difference. Some have used it and they don't like it, and it could be that their iron wasn't warm enough or their iron was too hot. And you also cannot use a press cloth when you're using melt away. The whole purpose of this is for your iron to touch that melt away, so it will create these little balls. That's the whole purpose of it. And no, it does not ruin your iron. I use it quite a bit, and I've never had an issue with it leaving any kind of residue on my iron or my ironing board. The one thing you do want to do, and I can't stress this enough, is just pay attention to the instructions. There are different brands out there of melt away stabilizer, and each brand may have a different setting that you need to use. So everyone thinks of it as a topper. Well, I often use it as a backing, and it can be used as a backing. Many times I'll use 2 layers to give me a little bit more stability, and also to help if I'm using a design that may perforate it, because think of it like a wash away, your wash away topper. If the if the design is too dense, it can perforate it, and then it's not really working for you anymore. But perfect for lightweight fabrics, such as if you're going to embroider on maybe some tulle or some organza or something like that. It works perfectly for that. So let me show you this sample. Poor thing has traveled and it's not in perfect condition. So this is a tray that I made. It is just a basic picture frame, and these are handles. I painted the frame, and these handles came from your box craft store. And what I used in there was a linen. I had a piece of linen that was left over, and it was a good quality linen. And if any of you have worked with linen in the past, you know that it has a slinky kind of movement to it. It doesn't want to stay put when you're using it. And you do need to pull a thread all the way across in the area where you want to cut it. So, and I did that. I pulled the threads, and because this was a good quality linen, it didn't take me long to pull that thread. If you get lower quality linens, that thread may break on you in between, and then you'll have to dig it out in the middle and start pulling it again. I'm sure those of you who work with linen, you know this. What I'm getting at is because it has a slinky body to it, I sprayed that linen quite heavily with a starch so that when I did hoop it and started to do the embroidery on it, it wouldn't shift in the hoop. It would stay put. And I wanted to use the clear and melt behind it. I did 2 layers. I used clear and melt as my under stabilizer. because I knew when I needed to trim this down, I did not want to wash it first. I wanted to keep that shape of that heavy stabilizer. So if I were to use something for the topper, I would probably want to pull that away and wash it. But I really wanted this linen to keep its wonderful body so that I can cut it to the shape of that frame. So I used clear melt instead so that I can just melt it away. It isn't going to interfere with all the starch that I put in it. And I was able to get it away. So if I did leave any wash away stabilizer in there, let's say I did use a wash away stabilizer and I didn't wash it out, if I use this tray for what I intend to use it for, and that's for a tea day, if I ever get a tea day, and I put my hot pot on that tray, the wash away will start to shrivel and shrink and get sticky underneath the fabric because of the heat from my teapot. And I really don't want that. So for this instance, clear and melt was, no pun intended, the clear choice for this project. So it's not just a topper. You can use it as a backing. And I'm going to say, if you're unsure about it, try it. What do you got to lose? Just pull out a scrap piece of fabric, put a little embroidery on it, and see for yourself and see how it works. I don't use it a lot, but I do use it for situations like that. And I'm so glad I did because it worked out in my favor. So yay. Okay, that is clear melt. Make sure you read the instructions. I can't stress that enough. All righty. So let's go on to, while we're talking about toppers, you have your wash away topper, and there are two different water soluble toppers that are out there, and I use them for different reasons. I have, oops, that's not it. Dissolve away and waterworks soluble. So there's two different ones, and they both come in different sizes. And the difference between them is one is a little lighter than the other one. So when do you choose to use that one? Well, I'm going to tell you. I use the dissolve away on things that have a higher pile. Definitely my bath towels. Those have a high pile and they're also lofty. So because the dissolve away is a little bit thicker than the waterworks soluble film, I want something that is going to sit on that surface and keep my stitches from being pulled into that plush towel. So I do use the dissolve away. And of course, when you use the dissolve aways or even the clear melt, you're going to try and pull as much as that away that you can. So the least that you have to melt away or wash away, the better. You really don't want to just take something and leave the topping on and then just dunk that with the full topping on it. It's just going to make a big sticky mess. So you just, and I'm sure you know this, pull as much of it away as you possibly can. Then for the waterworks soluble film, this one is a little bit, it's a little bit lighter. It's not as thick as the dissolve away. That one I use for fabrics that are a knit, but they have a lower pile. And when I say lower pile, the texture of it. So your sweatshirt knits on the smooth side, you still want to use a topper for that because stitches can still sink into that, but you don't need as thick of a topper because it's not as high as a terry cloth would be. So I use it for that. I also use it for fleece. I know fleece is quite popular. Again, it's knit and it's plush, but it doesn't have fingers and things, thread fingers and stuff like that stick up. So again, I use the lighter one and it tears away cleaner. Do you have to have both? I'm going to say yes, but you don't have to. You can do one or the other. If you're only going to do one, I would highly suggest to do the dissolve away. So that will check the boxes of those really plush fabrics. And you can also use it on the ones that have a more smoother surface, but still the stitches can sink in. Okay. So also, while we're talking about washaways, my next stabilizer is Aqua Magic. And Aqua Magic, we know, is a water soluble. It is perfect for your 3D embroideries. And when I say 3D, I mean your freestanding lace. So if you look behind me, we have some freestanding butterflies here. This was done in 3 hoopings. These butterflies can be found on my Sewnet library. And what I did was, there's 3 different butterflies for that. And in my Sewnet software, I did resize them. So each of the 3 different butterflies, I resized them so that I had 3 different sizes of each butterfly. And I was able to fill a whole entire hoop with these butterflies. And I wound my bobbin with the same thread that I used for my top. And yes, it did take a lot of thread, but that's okay, because that is really pretty. And it came out exactly as I imagined it in my head. And that is pretty awesome, because, you know, we all have these things that we imagine something and it doesn't necessarily come out as you imagine it in your head. This one did. I was as giddy as a schoolgirl. But anyway, let me double back to my stabilizer. So what I did was, because these are dense, even though they are airy, freestanding lace can be quite dense. All of those threads are meant to intermingle with each other and lock in, so that you don't have to have any kind of fabric, such as a tulle or an organza, behind those. They're meant to be airy, and yes, they can be dense. So I used 2 layers of the Aqua Magic. And that helped with the pull of the stabilizer. And I'm sure you know what I mean by pull of the stabilizer. When you hoop something and you have a dense design, the area around it starts to pull in and you can see some ripples. And does that make too much of a difference on the water soluble? Not too much. However, if there's too much pull of that water soluble, what's going to happen is that your stitches for your lace aren't going to lay right, and it may deform the lace. So I used 2 layers of the Aqua Magic to give it that extra support. And I did cut as close to the thread as possible when I unhooked it, so that I really wanted to get as much of that stabilizer out before I put it in the water. And I used a lukewarm water. Hot water, it just makes things stickier. So I did use a lukewarm water. And how I did that was, I didn't dunk them all at one time. You can if you want to, but here, let me tell you what's going to happen. It's going to make a sticky mess, and you're going to need a lot more water to do that than if you dunk them at a few at a time. So I think I had 9 to 10 butterflies in a hoop, and that was my 360 by 260 hoop. So when that one was done, I replaced it, started hooping another one. This particular project took me 3 hoopings of those butterflies, and each hooping took about 9 hours. Not a big deal, because you know what? I have the My Sewnet app on my phone, so it was able to tell me, hey, Wendy, you're almost out of bobbin thread. And I was able to go in and switch my bobbin thread. I wasn't tied to my machine, which is super nice because I have that app. We'll double back to that. So as the second hoop was stitching, I was trimming the other butterflies, and I had them soaking in my sink for a little bit of time. I drained that water, and then I put, I don't want to say I filled my sink, because you don't have to fill the sink. You just need it so that they're covered. And then I changed the water, and I did that process again. Depending on how stiff or how airy you want them to be, you don't necessarily always want to wash out all of the stabilizer. Some of these, while they were still slightly damp, so these curved ones, I laid those over my rolling pin so that it gave it some shape. So as it was drying, it had that curved shape so that all of the butterflies weren't necessarily like super flat. So, and I left a little bit of the stabilizer in there. I didn't want to leave too much because I still wanted that lace to feel a little bit softer. So I did take the time to try and wash more of it out than if I were to do something like a 3D design. If I were to create a lace box and sew all the sides together, for that, I probably would have left a little bit more of the stabilizer in there so that it would give me some stiffness to sew the box together. But for something like this, I definitely wanted to remove as much as I possibly could. Okay, Aqua Magic Plus, great stabilizer. It is perfect for hooping things that are difficult to hoop. So if you hoop your stabilizer alone and you can lay things on top of it, again, you also have the option for the sticky tearaway. I don't use the sticky tearaway too much. I do use the Aqua Magic Plus a lot because of the sticky quality. There are many things that you have an issue that you really can't hoop, or you don't have a small enough hoop, or a situation like that. So having that sticky stabilizer to help you hold your project in place is wonderful. So for this project right here, the sweater, it's a little wrinkly. Sorry, it travels with me. Let me pull that up so you can see that. So this is an applique design. It is a lightly knit sweater, just a store-bought sweater. And for this, because it was difficult to hoop because of where the placement was of it. I didn't want to hoop it, so I did use the Aqua Magic Plus so that I can just lay my sweater on top of it, and it helped with easy placement. So if it wasn't placed exactly where I wanted it, I just easily lifted it up and then pressed it, used my hand, put it back in place if I needed to adjust it to where I needed it to be. So, and it was an applique, so it didn't need too much stabilizing. And when I finished the embroidery, I was able to wash the sweater and get the excess stabilizer out so that if I wore this sweater open, you wouldn't see any kind of stabilizer behind, which is nice. So, by the way, those cat designs, they are a free download. I did digitize those. They are a free download on my SewNet library. So if you want to make a sweater for yourself, now is the time. It's Halloween time. Those cats would work out perfectly. You can, instead of using little pink buttons like I did here, you can maybe stitch these out on a purple sweater and replace those buttons, and use orange buttons or something like that. And you have an instant Halloween sweater that doesn't scream Halloween, but it would be Halloween. Okay. Oh, I don't see any questions coming in, so I hope I'm explaining everything if there's no questions coming in. So let's move on. While we're talking about the water-soluble stabilizers, there is this one stitch that is on the icon too that is super cool. And that is, let's see if I can get close here. That is the lace stitch. So this stitch right here, I hope you can see that. It is dimensional. It is the 3D stitch. And that is done using a water-soluble stabilizer because it is a freestanding stitch. And I think I'm going to demonstrate how we do that. So I'm going to switch over. And in my machine, I have a 12-weight thread. It works perfect with a 12-weight thread because it really gives it some dimension. And I have a 110 needle in my machine. I usually like using a 120 top stitch needle when I'm sewing with a 12 weight thread, but unfortunately I did not have a 120 needle. So if you notice that you're having some issues, move up to that next size up needle. You'll have better results, but I think we're going to be fine with the 110. I am going to move over to my icon 2, and I'm going to menu 8. And there's a subcategory that is 8.7, and in there are 6 different lace stitches. And I'm going to show you how to do that. In my bobbin, I have just a 40 weight thread, your basic construction thread, something that will match your 12 weight thread. You really do not want to put the 12 weight thread in your bobbin. That would be a different kind of work. That would be more bobbin work. So it's not going to work well in your needle and in the bobbin. This stitch works great to sew onto a finished edge. And that's what I did here. I just took a piece of fabric and folded it over so that I have a finished edge. Perfect for if you want to sew this on the edge of ribbon, or if you have, let's say, a collar that you made. That edge is finished because it's, you stitch your collar and you turn it in, and then you just have that nice finished edge. So you could do it on that. Perfect for on hems and things like that. And you saw it on the pillow. The pillow, I stitched it onto the binding that is around that pillow edge. So to do this, you want to line this up. And the objective here is, think of it as a zigzag. You want, when your needle moves to the left, you just want it to take like a little bite out of it. And you want the majority of the stitching to be done on the water stabilizer, on the water soluble stabilizer. So let me get started here. And it's telling me it wants the IDT. And this foot that I have on does not have IDT capability. So I have it set so it's going to automatically do a tie off. And I'll just do a few. You can do this with other weight threads. I just prefer the 12 weight thread because it just really gives it a definition. You can also do this with your embroidery threads to give it some sheen. It is completely up to you. There are some nice cotton 12 weight threads. There's some wool 12 weight threads. Just find one that works for you and give it a try. I would suggest, though, do it on a sample and see how it works out for you. And just know that the wool, and because my needle, and you can see that my thread broke because the needle is, I should have used a 120, but you'll get the idea here. So here is that stitch. And do you see how that 12 weight thread really changes it? It just gives it some oomph. And I just slightly took a bite into this finished edge so that all of this is hanging off. And once you have it as much as you want to do, I would trim away as much as possible. Sometimes I would even go in and try and clip some of those little ones away in between. And the only reason why I would do that is because for this particular application, this stitch, I really don't want stabilizer left behind. I don't need it super stiff. I'm not sewing anything together with this. I'm not trying to make it a 3D box or anything. I want this to be soft. I don't want it to be crunchy or anything. I really want this to be soft. So the more you can get trimmed away from this, the better, so that when you soak this, more of the stabilizer will come out and it will be softer. Even on the pillow that I did, I feel like I did not get enough of that stabilizer washed out, because those edges, they feel a little sharp to me. So I wish I would have washed out more of it, taken the time to do that. And this thread here, this is a variegated thread. So again, it added some dimension to it. So it doesn't have to be flat. You can have some dimension to it just from choosing different threads. So a great stitch can be fun. And if you take those stitches into the embroidery hoop and you use your design shaping, you can line them up so that you can create a whole entire panel of lace, which is super cool. And I forgot that sample. It is downstairs in my suitcase, but you can take those stitches in and stitch those out on a water-soluble stabilizer, and you can have a whole panel of those lace stitches. And again, play with the different threads. You can still use a 12-weight thread for that, even in the embroidery unit. For that, again, you want to match your thread because it is a two-sided stitch because it's on water-soluble. You'll see both of them. So let's see. I think I have a question here. So Vicki is asking, she's saying, I'm going to put a word design on a dinner napkin. I don't want my stabilizer to show on the back of the napkin. What kind of stabilizer would I use? I'm just assuming that you're using maybe a linen or a cotton. And if it's a lightweight, this is a great segment. Thank you, Vicki. You could use a water soluble, the Aqua Magic, or you can use, I've got a whole bucket of stabilizers down here. It's like magic. I'm just pulling them up. We do have tear and wash. So there we go. Tear and wash. And what this is, it has a paper to it, and it also has some microfibers. And this particular stabilizer, it is not necessarily fused together like some of the other stabilizers where they're just fibers and they fuse those fibers together. These are actually bonded in a different way. So it's going to act like a tearaway stabilizer, but whatever you do not are able to tear out, and you don't have to get tweezers out to try and pick all of that out. Whatever doesn't tear out, you can wash it away. But the microfibers that are in with the paper fibers, the microfibers are going to stay behind so that it will help stabilize that embroidery. So you're not completely washing everything away. You still have some kind of support to support those stitches. I have a mess right now. So on this towel, now this is a terry cloth towel, but on the surface, this surface is pretty smooth. I would still use a topper because if you look close at it, it has a waffle texture to it. So I would use one of my wash away stabilizers, the dissolve away on top, and you can use the tear and wash behind it. Or you can use your Aqua Magic, because this is not a very dense or involved design. For this particular design on the terry, you could use just Aqua Magic for the back and just have it all washed away. But if you're getting into something that is a little more of a dense design, I would go with the tear and wash so that you can get rid of the stabilizer you don't want to see. And of course, you don't want to see stabilizer on your napkins. And Vicki, I'm thinking, are you just going to be monogramming that? Or are you going to be doing a design around it as well? And if that design is dense, or if it's a lot of really close stitches together, go with the tear and wash. if you're just doing a simple monogram, you might want to just go with the Aqua Magic. That should work for you. Either one of those will do. That was a great question. Thank you. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, next, stabilizer. So we've got those taken care of. The next one, there are a few different tearaway stabilizers, and I'm going to talk about my favorite one right now. And that is, and I'm definitely going to have Amy or Meredith type in this name. This is called Stitch and Ditch. And what this is basically, it's just a paper stabilizer. It has the qualities of a tissue paper, but it's heavier than a tissue paper. And I do not use it in the hoop. It's not meant for something in the hoop. I do use it a lot when I'm doing decorative stitches because it's lightweight. It gives me the support. It keeps my fabric from being sucked into the needle plate, and it tears away so easily. It doesn't leave anything behind like a lightweight stabilizer would that you have to try and pick out. So it is ideal for decorative stitches. It's ideal for when you're doing heirloom sewing and you are sewing on some lace. So this lace was done with a wing needle. So I did put Stitch in the Ditch behind this area to stitch that lace onto the edge because the wing needle, it has motions and it's putting holes in it. And I did not want to have to tear away or get out the tweezers to tear away some of the tear that if I used a tearaway stabilizer, it just tears off so cleanly. It's amazing. I also use it sometimes if I'm doing some applique, and I'm not saying applique in the embroidery hoop. I mean, if I'm manually doing like a blanket stitch on an applique, I will put that behind my base fabric. So it allows it to move easily, and it does support my stitches. It gives me enough support for the stitches that I need to get them done. And let me show you this little project here. This was done. These are some decorative stitches on the machine. And you can see that I have my favorites. I usually go for the feather stitch when I'm doing something like this. So I pieced it together. I did my crazy patch piecing, and then I used Stitch in the Ditch in the back and then went over those seams with the decorative stitch. There was no need to have something super heavy behind that because I was sewing on top of, a seam, which there's some loft there. And there are times that if you use a tearaway stabilizer and you do not get it all out, sometimes I am a lazy stitcher. I do not pull it all out. Again, I don't police myself. And it has that crunchy sound to it because you didn't take it all out, or you did an applique and you didn't pull it from the center of the applique and it has that crunchiness. So instead of dealing with that kind of tearaway stabilizer, use Stitch in the Ditch. It rips away super easily, so you don't even have to think about it. Pretty much nothing's going to be left behind by the time you tear it off. I also use it for buttonholes. If I'm putting buttonholes on a placket or whatever, I do use that behind it. It just gives me a little bit of support, and it just helps that buttonhole foot move a little bit smoother. So I use it for that. I also use it for as a leader. And when I mean by a leader, if you're sewing small little pieces, you're making your quilt block and you're piecing, and you have these little pieces that you're trying to sew together, and you want to try and get to the corner or the tip or the right on the edge of this particular two pieces you're sewing together. If you're too close and you don't have your straight stitch needle plate on, and I do suggest your straight stitch needle plate if you're piecing, but not everyone has that. If you use a leader, you start stitching in that leader, and then you move forward to stitch that particular piece that you're doing together. It's going to help, again, from your fabric being pulled in to the feed dogs and help avoid birds' nests. So I do have it a lot. Some people use scrap fabric as their leader, but I am always that one person who sews that leader onto my project, and I have to end up picking it out. So if I use Stitch in the Ditch, I don't have to worry about picking that leader out. It can also be used for tracing patterns. This does come in a larger roll, so you can use it to trace patterns. It's pretty transparent, so if you lay it on top of something, easily trace it out. I've heard some use it for paper piecing. I'm not a paper piecing person. I have done it before, but it's not my favorite technique. And the downfall of using it for paper piecing, it works great. It does tear away nicely after you get the fabric on, but you cannot run this through your printer. So if you were using it for paper piecing, you would literally have to trace out your paper piecing design with a pen or something onto that, opposed to getting that design and just running it through your printer like a lot of sewers do onto printer paper. I do like the Stitch and Ditch. I would prefer the Stitch and Ditch over the other paper, just because that other paper could be a bit stiff, and it just, your choice though. But I'm not big of a paper piecer. So there you have it. Okay, I have another question. Christine, I have a light and tacky tearaway by Inspira, and it is really hard to pull off the roll. Is this common? Christine, I've never had that issue. I'm sorry. Usually they just it usually just works for me. I don't know what to say for you, dear. Yeah, I don't know what to say. And is it just the edges? I'm wondering if the edges just were exposed, or it didn't. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say to that, because I've never had that issue. It usually just comes away for me. Someone else had mentioned that sometimes it's tough, but it never tears. So as long as it doesn't tear and you're not wasting it, that's a good thing. So sorry. I wish I can be of more help for you. Okay. Let me see. You know what? I also want to show you some there's different tearaways. So tearaways. There's a tearaway, and we all know what our tearaway is. And there's also a tearaway light. And I know it's going to be very difficult to see on camera the difference between them. But let's see if you can. You can hear the difference. See? You see difference in the noise, and that's what I mean by it's being left behind. Sometimes you don't feel like tearing out all the stabilizer, and if you don't feel like tearing out all the stabilizer, that's okay. Again, I'm not the stabilizer police, and I leave stabilizer in my projects too. So if you can see, one is a little airier than the other, and you're probably wondering, why do I need both? I like to have both because this one, the heavier one, I use more for in the hoop projects. It does give me that stableness that I need, and it's durable and it tears away easily. But I also like having this light tearaway stabilizer, because there is a super fun stitch that I totally love on my icon too. And it is a floating stitch. And those are super fun. Those are also found on the Icon 1. It's on the 720. It's on a few other machines as well. And while I love Stitch in the Ditch for using my decorative stitches, for the floating stitches, the Stitch in the Ditch basically doesn't support it. The stitch is going to stitch right through it and perforate the stitch in the ditch. I need some kind of support, because for when you're doing the floating stitches on a fabric, not piecing, you can use floating stitches to piece two pieces of fabric together, but you can also use the floating stitches to make it look like it's floating on a whole piece of fabric as well. And for that, you need to have half of the stitches stitching off onto the stabilizer and half on to the fabric. And I'm going to show you that. I am going to leave my 110 needle in. Just, you know what? No, I'm not. It's not going to take me all that long to switch needles. And I just have a regular embroidery thread that's an embroidery thread that I'm going to use. These, the floating stitches are, I consider them satin stitches because they basically are. Oh my God, it's like magic. Magic. I'm still in my techniques. That's category 8s. And if I go to my floating stitches, there are so many fun floating stitches. And my favorite, don't know why, don't read into this, is the mushroom. I totally love it, that gosh darn mushroom. So we're going to do the mushroom. Again, this stitch works best if you have the same thread in the bobbin that you do on top. This is an embroidery thread that I have in the needle right now. And I just have a basic black sewing thread in the bobbin. So I'm going to sew this off, and we can use the start stop button. I'm going to turn that down just a little. And what I did here was this piece of fabric, it's folded in half, right sides together, and I have my lighter weight stabilizer right here. And you can see that it's stitching half on, half off. I touched my scissors so that it would end at a motif. It'll finish off that motif. It's tying it off. And it's cutting it for me. It really takes the thinking process out of it. So there are the floating stitches. So I hope you can see those. Love that mushroom. So the whole idea of this is there's connecting stitches there. And if you tear this away, I'm just trying to do it kind of quickly. And then you pull this open. And there you have your floating stitches. And this is why I would use this Tearaway light opposed to Stitch in the Ditch. Because it is a lighter weight, and these stitches, as you can see, they're, for the most part, they are a satin stitch. Oops, you don't even see them. For the most part, they are a satin stitch. So you need to have some kind of support for when the needle goes to the right and it stitches half of it on. For these stitches, I do suggest that you use a stable woven fabric because you notice that I am pulling on this. I really want to try and get rid of that little divot that's in there, so I need to pull on it. These stitches would not be ideal for a bias area because you will distort it. But if I take this over to my iron and I give that a little press, it's these mushrooms are just literally floating on my fabric. So that's when I would use that other Tearaway stabilizer. So there is a time and a place for each of our different stabilizers. Okay. I hope you were able to see that. I noticed I knocked my camera over, so I hope you were able to see how everything's stitched out. But I love the stitches. Those are super fun. And again, let me show you. I have some of them stitched out here on this pillow. So this one, I used the floating stitches to sew two pieces of fabric together, opposed to just having it like literally floating on a piece of fabric. And I did that on quite a few of them. And there's some like little crowns. So I really have fun with these stitches. When I'm doing these stitches, sewing two of them together, like I did here, I have the two different fabrics. Because those fabrics are right sides together and I'm stitching through two layers, at that point, I probably will use my stitch in the ditch stabilizer. Because I have the support of the two fabrics, I don't necessarily need to have a heavier stabilizer. So yes, I'm always going to keep both of those different stabilizers in my arsenal because I do use them for different reasons. And, you know, if you use the right tools the first time around, you won't have an issue of doing something over. Okay, so are there any questions? Just go ahead and type them in the chat. You don't have to remember everything that I said here because there's two things that you can do. One, this video will be posted up on Facebook, so you will have all that information. And two, you have an app. You have an app for that. That's such a popular phrase, and I'm going to show you that app. Log into my phone. So on my phone, and the app is good for Droids or for iPhones. And you can find them in your app store. And if Meredith or Amy can type in the name of it, it is called Creator Q. So it's right here next to my ways. And in Creator Q, you have this list here. And one of them is Stabilizer Guide. And oops, you know, let me go to the home because there's other things in there. So you can see that there's a needle guide, there's a stabilizer guide, there's an accessory guide. The accessory guide is really cool. So if you are out and about and you don't necessarily know what foot you need or whatever, you can look at that accessory guide, and it's so nice to have that handy. The needle guide, the quick start guide. There are even sewing instructions on this app. So the Icon and the Icon 2 and the Icon Performance, there's other machines that are Wi-Fi capable. This is pretty much the app that is built into your sewing machine for those Wi-Fi capable machines. So if you're out and about and you're sitting in an airport and you're just curious about what stabilizer you need, you can just touch the stabilizer guide and it goes into different categories. And as you touch on a category, it brings up the different stabilizers and you're able to just touch on that. And it explains to you exactly what that stabilizer is for and gives you some instruction on it and how to use it and some applications that it's used for. So it's pretty darn awesome that that app is out there and that you can access that on your machines as well. It's super nice. So you never really have to do a Google search anymore. You just look at your app, look at your sewing machine, and that information is there for you. So if you don't have that app, get it. It's worth its weight in gold. It really is. Okay, so if there are no further questions, I'm going to tell you that next on Facebook Live is going to be Dee Marie with tips and tricks for using embroidery stitches. And next on my SewNet Facebook Live, which is a Wednesday, November 9th, is with Nancy Bronstein demonstrating the spiral design wizard. It's just, that one is just so fun. You could just sit there and keep hitting the random button. You never know what design you're going to get. So if you have the MySewNet software, and I do suggest that you should have it, it's the best software I have tried. And I can't imagine being an embroiderer and not having software. It just opens up this huge world of even more creativity, and it can really get you out of your box. So I would, if you don't have it, look into it. And Nancy's going to do a great job with that spiral design. And I forgot to tell you what day Dee Marie is doing the next PFAFF webinar. And that is Thursday, November 3rd at 2 o'clock Central Time. So check in with Dee Marie and see what kind of tips and tricks she is using for embroidery stitches. So without further ado, I want to thank you all for joining me today and have a super great rest of your day. Bye.